This is our another emite data block in focus covering status engage data blocks. I'm your moderator, Chris Conley, and with me is our emite maven, Ria. A quick note on Q&A. There's a button at the bottom where you can submit your questions. You can just click it and type in your questions. We'll get a list of them and get through as many as we can at the end. And yeah, with that said, and without further ado, Ria, take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. And again, welcome to another session of Data Blocks in Focus. And just for everybody's update, we have been running these webinars now for the past couple of weeks, and you can catch the recorded sessions in our emite YouTube channel, which is what you're seeing right now. And we have two themes for our webinars. So for today, we have Data Block and Focus, and another webinar that you would catch in the YouTube channel would be emite Life Hacks. So that would be very exciting, where you would learn a lot of tips and tricks on how you can navigate an emite. So please do visit our YouTube channel and catch the rest of the recordings that we have. And we'll have more. I think we'll have 3 more webinars until we end 2019, and all of those will also get saved in YouTube. Okay, so for today, we're going to talk about everything and anything about status data blocks and how we can maximize them. And the same thing would happen for Gauge. So we paired our status and Gauge data blocks for today. So I'll go ahead and just quickly share my slides and get into emite. I'm actually logged in, and as you can see, I have a blank page right now, and we'll start off with status data blocks. So let me go ahead and add pretty basic. So we'll add, say, 2 data blocks. Before that, you also have some options here. You can add some data blocks from page template. If you click on this one, so these are some of the out-of-the-box dashboards that we have, and you can also create from those templates. And a widget template, because later on you will see that we can also make some of our data blocks as templates, and this is where it would fall under. And these are also some of the canned widgets that we can use over and over, that pretty much saves us time instead of creating something out of scratch, and also from your own pages. So I have a couple of pages here, and I can also select which data block I would want to reuse. So very, very convenient. Now let's just try to create something from scratch, shall we? So let me add 2 data blocks, and it would bring you straight to the menu. So we're focusing on status and Gauge for today. So I'll add 2 status data blocks, and this is where right off the bat you can also just rename the data block itself, choose what type of status data block you would use, and also change the color of the header. But for now, we'll just keep it as is. So let me just add that and add one more. The second one, I would want to use a circular status. Okay, so let me just resize this to my liking. Oops, I think that's too big. Oops, all right. I think I just need to make this a little bit smaller. This here, there you go. So we now have 2 big status data blocks, and I'll just quickly go over the data block icons that we have over here, and this would help you set some settings for your data block and do a lot of different things. So this icon that you see for format painter is unique for status data block. So pretty much all of the settings that I would do for this particular data block, and if I hit format painter and then click on the other data block, all of the aesthetic settings would be carried over to the other data block, which saves us time. So it's very, very helpful. It's actually my favorite function in the status data block. So header style will be where all of the settings for font, color, background will be in. So we'll definitely get in there in a bit later. And this is what I'm referring to earlier, making your data block as template or save it as template so that you can just reuse it over and over. And again, that saves you time. And this data block over here will just launch the data block itself as another tab in your browser. And then this is also very important, choose data source. That's where you can get the measure from that would reflect in your status data block. And then this one is for time config, pretty much a date picker for this particular data block or on a data block level. So you can choose the different time configurations that we have available. And then you can link your status data blocks with other data blocks. And this is for changing the type. So by default, it's just status. If you want to change it to circular or multiple circle, then you can go ahead and do so. And this is just to, oops, let me just click on cancel. Okay, this one is for refresh, but there's no data yet. So we'll go back to the refresh in a bit later. And this is just to maximize it. If you want to resize it, go back to it. And then if you just want to close it out, then just hit on the X mark. So let's choose a measure for our data block. So you have the option to choose your measure from the reports that you have saved. So I'll do that later. But for this particular data block, I'll just choose from the canned measures or the out-of-the-box measures that we have. And my index for this data block would be agent observations. And I would like to see how many agents are currently available. So there. So I'll change the static settings in a bit later, and I'll do the same thing for the other data block we have here. Go to agent observations, and this time I want to see how many agents are busy. Just have one. All right. So now that we have the measures or the values for our status data blocks, let's go ahead and make this look even better. So for the header, I can go ahead and choose to just leave it blank, take out the default header, or just uncheck the checkbox over here that says show header text. I'll just do that. And then I would want to have the header in black. And I think that's good for me for now. And then description, I'll just go ahead and put here, available. Make sure I'm spelling it right. There. And I can also opt to change the font, and I'll choose Arial for this. I'm good for the description for now. And then here, for the status style, I can actually add a background color and make it look more interesting. So I can have a gradient sort of background color, and I'll do that now. Just select something gray, the starting color, and then stop. I would want to use something close to a periwinkle. There. So by default, this is the direction. You can definitely change that as well. So I'll just choose from left button. So everything good. I can also change the format of the actual measure or the status. So I don't want to have it in decimal, or I don't want to have two decimal places for this. So I'll just change that and select comma. I think we're good here. All right, there. So that's so far the initial settings that I want to see in my status data block. And if I'm happy with it, what I can do is to use the format painter and apply that to the other data block I have here. So there, it gets carried over, at least for the background color. Now I can do more for this status data block. I'll go back to header settings, and I can add some threshold rules for this. So example, certain rules for changing. It's similar to conditional formatting, and we can set those rules in the backend or from a data block level. So let me go ahead and do that. So say from 0 to 30, I'll choose green color. Next to say 60, I'll choose yellow. And then lastly, yep, I'll choose red. Okay. Now, this is also unique for status data blocks. As far as threshold settings are concerned, you can add an image, or not just an image, you can also add some GIFs if you want to. That would be in the background if your status data block following that particular threshold rule that you've set. And you can also set some alarm tones if you want to. So I'll try to do that for this rule. I have some, where did I find? Okay, this is my folder. So say I want to use this alert tone. Just double check on everything. I think I'm good with this. Click on OK. So you would hear that alert tone, right? But you would notice that the text did not change its color. So we have to go back to header style and make sure that for both description and status style, as it says here, you have to select status. Make sure that that's clicked, as well as for status style over here, and click on status as well to get the settings from your threshold rules. So if you click on OK, then that should change. And as you notice, it did. So for this other status data block, I'll try to change some things here because I don't like how it looks at the moment. So I can add the description and say busy Arial. I can also change the font size if I want to. And then by default, if you notice, for your status data blocks, the size or the font size would auto scale depending on the size of your data block. But for this instance, I would just want to make it bigger and say, so I will see in the background how big it is. If it's in my liking, then we're good to go. I can also change the font color if I want to make that green. There. But I'm not really getting the feel of this circular status data block. So I can go ahead and change that by clicking on change type and just make it status as well, or the default mode of status data block. There. So let's go ahead and format and make sure that we carry over the threshold settings. There. Now, since you have carried over the threshold rules from the data block on the left to the one on the right, you can also just get in to the header style, go back in thresholds, and change that to your liking. I'll just go ahead and invert that to a red, and then the last one would be green instead, because that makes more sense for this data block. There, right? Now, another interesting thing as far as background is concerned, apart from having a gradient background, we can also add some images if we want to. So just click on the header style again and go to this tab, status style, click on this background image, and we have some saved background images within emite that you can use. And I would want to use this dark blue background. So just make sure if you want to have the entire image cover the whole data block, so you would have to select cover, and then center, click on OK. There. Then I would want to do the same thing for this and just use the format painter very quickly. There, so that looks pretty nice for me. And if I want to add some borders, I can go ahead and do that as well. I'll use a white color for it. And I would use, say, a dotted border. And I just want to take this out, this middle part of the border. I can also do that, just go back to it and X out middle here. Okay, and if I'm happy with this, I can just format and copy it over to the other data block. There. So we can definitely resize this, move it around. If you're using this page as a dashboard, so then you can add another data block. But this time around, we'll add a cube report from my data set or report set. And I've already created a report previously for service level today. There. So you can, if you're happy with this, you can just save this page. And that's just one of the uses of your status data blocks, you know, making your dashboards look better and would give more meaning to your dashboard. So since you have a report here for service level today, you would definitely want to monitor and track who are the ones available and who are the ones busy in a call, right? So let me go to another blank page that I have here and just add 3 more data blocks. We'll still work on status data blocks. This is another use wherein we can create a wallboard, or we'll start creating a custom wallboard. Just for the interest of time, let me go ahead and rename this data block right away and choose, I'll just leave the header color to light blue by default. And we'll do the same thing for the other two. And lastly, of course, would be bronze. All right, I'll just resize it. Okay, now if earlier our data source was from measure, this time around, I'll go ahead and use some of the reports in my report set as the source of measure for my status data blocks. And then same thing for the other two. Let me just quickly select that. And then lastly, oops, here we go. Top 3. All right, so happy with the measure. That's how I want it. So my aim is to create a wallboard that would show the top 1, 2, and 3 groups who would have the most number of interacting agents. So let me go ahead and just change a couple of settings here and make it more meaningful and interesting. So I'll start off with the status data block. I will just focus on one status data block and carry over the other settings to the rest of the other 2 data blocks to save more time. So I'll just make this font, the header font, bigger. I'll change its font style as well. I want this font. I'll make it, say, 50. Font color, I'll make it black. What else? Think I'm good for the header style. Yep. And then for the description, if you notice, by default, whatever the header text is, gets carried over as the description text. So I can go ahead and change that or delete that if I want to. But another thing that I can do is to know from which group or what group has the most number of interacting agents. So getting it from the cube report, which was the source of this status blocks measure, I can just click on use report member over here, make sure it's checked, and it would then give you the group name of from the x-axis of this cube report that I've used as the data source. So you'll see that in a bit. I'll just also go ahead and change the font type for this. What else? I'm good. For the status style, we'll add some images in a bit later. So we'd see I won't add any threshold settings here. So let's go ahead and check what I have. So there, so you notice that the font type changed and it now says help desk. So help desk has the most number of interacting agents. So let me just go ahead and carry over these settings using, again, the format painter feature of the status data block. And just resize this a little bit. Okay, we're good. Now I just want to do some more as far as the aesthetics are concerned. I want to have a gold color, a solid gold header color. So I can go ahead and do that. So by default, it's light blue and you don't see any gold here. So you have to click on custom. You also have the option to have a gradient effect for the header color, but I just want to have one solid gold color across the board. So just choose that, hit on apply. Then what else? I can also opt to change, if I go to status and change the font of the measure itself and match it all throughout with the header and the description font. So we'll go ahead and do that. Hit on OK. But that's too much for me. I can just always bring it back to the default font and just select none. And we're good. Now, if you want to change the color of the measure itself and match it with the header, you can definitely do that as well. And that's what I'm going to do. So in status, we have font color here. So I will just copy the same color code for the header. There. So I'm pretty happy with that now. Okay, so I'll do the same thing for silver and bronze. So just have to change the color, make it custom. Got the code for the silver. Oops, silver color that I want. Here. And same thing just for the font of the measure itself. Okay, and then lastly for the third data block, bronze. Custom. Oops. That's the color I want. And same thing for measure itself. Let's see. There. Okay. So another thing that I can do now is to add an image or say a picture of the actual metal. So just going back to status tab, I have some preset images here that I've saved earlier. So I would want to use this gold medal. Make sure it says inline setter. Then you will have that picture there. Same thing for silver and bronze. Let me just get those images in silver. And then one more for bronze. Right, where's my bronze? There you go. There. So am I happy with my settings? I'll just make this a little smaller. I think that's too big. There, I think that's better. Let me just resize this a little bit to fit the screen. Okay. Now, since we are trying to make a wallboard here, what we can do, or to achieve that, what we need to do is to group all these 3 status data blocks. And I'll just hit on add content and get to the group data block tab over here and just select all 3 status data blocks. And just a quick note, before you group these data blocks, just make sure that you're happy with the settings, because as soon as you group them together, you cannot change anything individually from a data block level. So just making sure that I'm happy with the settings here, but maybe just a little bit on, let me just take this out for a bit, on the size. Just would want to fit that. And probably add borders as well. So I can add a border. Just give me a sec. There you go. And which color would I use for my border? Just a gray or probably a white. And apply. And make sure I get this there. That's better. And that would also give you a better idea as far as the size of the data block is concerned. So if I do a format painter here, it would carry over the entire setting. So I'll just do it individually here. And just choose white. All right. Then last one for bronze. Okay. So we're good. Then let's group this now. I'm happy with it. Oops. Before I group it, I would also want to enable the refresh configuration for each of the data blocks. So I'll enable this, and every 60 seconds, each of the data blocks will refresh on its own. Or you can change the interval depending on your liking, but we'll just keep it at every minute refresh. So that's good. Same thing here. Oops, wrong icon here. Just enable it. Same thing for this last data block. All right, finally it's done. I'm ready to group them together. Select all status data blocks. So they're now grouped. If you notice, you will get an additional header over here for the entire group. You can also configure that. You can make this as another template. And if you want to ungroup it, because you would need to change something from the data block level, you can just click on this. And this is interesting, or before I get to the other types of the group data block, let me just change some of the settings here. make it a plain black or a transparent header, and just hide the text, header text, then we're good. All right. Here, I can either use a marquee then you can see that going, or if not, I can also use a 3D carousel. And this is another variation that you can use. So just try to picture with me if this is in a big screen in your contact center, then it would be very, very enticing, and it would be seen right across the room. So that's one of the better uses of a status data block. So you can also catch that recorded webinar in our YouTube channel, anything about wall boards. And this is just really getting into the detail on how we configure the status data blocks that we have used for wall boards. So you can see in that recorded session how you can share this to another wallboard account. So I'll leave that for you to see in that session or that recorded session. All right. So those are the things that we can do with status data blocks. I just use a marquee or change it to marquee. Then don't forget to save your work, save page. And now it's time to just go through and cover the gauge data blocks. So same thing, I'll go ahead and add a gauge data block over here. But before I do that, before I configure a gauge from scratch, I would then show you how to use the widget templates that we have available. So I'll use a radial gauge. That's one. I'll put it over here. I'll add one more. I think I'll use solid gauge. That's right here. And then one more gauge that I will create from scratch. Just select over here. And I'll keep it, or I'll use a V meter. All right. So I'll make this a little bigger for us to see. Here. All right. We'll just work on the sizes later. So when we use the widgets, these are already pre-configured. So all you have to do is to click on the data source and select where the measure would come from. And like if you create it, or if you select gauge from scratch, you would have to set, say, the threshold settings separately. All right. But if you notice, let's just quickly go through the different header icons for gauge over here. So all of the settings for font, static wise, will be in the header style. You can also save as template and show this data block as a separate tab in your browser. Of course, choosing your data sources over here, time configuration, your date picker. You can link your gauge data blocks with other data blocks as well, and then change the type here. We have several types for gauges, just to have different visual representations. And then refresh as well, but since we don't have a measure yet, so that's not available just yet. And then this is also how you can maximize it and close it out if you don't need it anymore. So let's just choose a source or a data source for this. And this time I would want to use Q observations. And let's go to predefined measures. And I'll select weight and count. See, so automatically you will now have some preset thresholds. If you actually go to the header style and get to thresholds, all of those have been preset because you used a widget. So it cuts your dashboard or data block work time considerably. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the solid gauge, and just so you see another variation of the gauge. This time I'll go to agent observations. Oops, I missed it over here. And then see how many agents are available. There. Now you can definitely change the font size of the measure here. So same thing. Let's just go to header style. So you can have it auto scale, or if you want to make it bigger, follow the font size to your liking, can go ahead and do that. Let's make that bigger. Can also change the font style. How about digital? Yep, and then I'll make it 100. It's too much, probably 80. Nope, there, just about right. Same thing for this. Let's just change for the solid gauge. We'll make it, say, this font and make it a little bit bigger again. There. All right. Now, this third gauge that we have, the one that I will create from scratch and have the settings set, we'll select another data source. So let's go to Q history this time. Trend measures, and I want to see today's grade of service or service level over here. Oops, missed it. Here we are. Then just click on OK. And you would notice that it's very bare. Like I said, and like with the widget, it's the threshold rules have been preset. So for this, fairly easy. Just get into header style again, then click on the thresholds tab, and you just need to set the thresholds yourself. You would also notice the difference for the thresholds in gauge, unlike in status that they would have options for inserting an image and an alert tone. For gauge, you won't get that. So let's just quickly set the rules for this gauge. Then I'll choose red for that. Add 2 more. Would be, say, orange or a yellow. I will choose yellow instead. And then lastly, 6 to would be a green. All right. Then again, if you want to change the measure itself, its font size, its color, its font type, just go back to status style. We'll use Arial. Mm, 80. Or if you also want to just have the font color itself to follow the threshold rules, you can go ahead and just click on status over here, and it would follow the settings that you've set in thresholds, like this. All right. So you can also just resize this and do the same thing that we did earlier for our status data blocks. If you would want to make this as your wall board, you can group them together. Definitely an option. So just have to resize it and then group them again. Over here. Then let me just take out the header and make that transparent. Okay, and select 3D carousel. This bigger or smaller. You can also use the marquee, whichever you would prefer. So those are some of the things that we can do for gauge and status data blocks. Very, very helpful, as well as making your not just your dashboard reporting more meaningful, but if you are to also broadcast it as wallboards, can definitely also get some ideas from the out of the box dashboards and wallboards that we have here. So you see how we can use or link different data blocks together. So I hope you learned some tips and tricks from the things I've shown you today, and I'll just pass it on to Chris and see if we have some questions from the group today.
Yeah, thanks, Ria. I especially love the 3D rotating graphs. You can do a lot of fun stuff with that. We do have a couple questions, and if you're on the call and you'd like to ask a question, now's the time to do it. Dave T asks if there's a limit on how many data blocks you can have on a dashboard. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I was on mute. So I think there's really no limit in the number of data blocks that you can have. It will now boil down to how well it would look on the page.
Gotcha.
So if you actually get into some of the out-of-the-box dashboards, particularly, let's have some here. So these are all individual data blocks. So you have a date picker here, that's one. You have status data blocks over here. So these are already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have cube reports. You have a drill through data block. So it's now all up to you, depending on the number of data blocks you need and how you would lay out them on the page.
That makes sense. And then the other question we have is from Jen, and she asks if you can set the radial gauge as a percent of the total. So I'm assuming what she means, instead of being like greater or less than 50, 100, that you set it as a percent instead.
For thresholds?
Yeah, for the threshold.
Let's go ahead and just get back here, make this a list, and ungroup it. That would be an advanced threshold setting that would be available for cube reports. So for gauge and status data blocks, it's pretty straightforward like this. Though what you can do if you want to have it as a percentage, you have to just get into the status style tab and you can change the format here.
Oh, that's cool. Makes a lot of sense.
There.
Let's see if we have any more questions. It doesn't look like we do. Well, thanks, Ria, for answering those questions. And thanks to everybody on the call for joining us.
Thank you, guys, and we look forward to have you again in the rest of the webinars that we would have for 2019. So thank you for your time today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. And you can always keep track of what webinars are coming up and watch recordings of previous webinars at emite.com on our webinars page. Thanks so much, everybody.